Today's episode will talk about the last crime of an American serial killer who killed countless victims wherever he went without the FBI having the slightest idea of his existence. Get ready, because today's case is all about Israel Keyes and his last unfortunate victim, Samantha Koenig. It was on the night of February 1st, 2012, in Anchorage, Alaska, United States, that an 18-year-old girl named Samantha Koenig was getting ready to leave work. Samantha was a barista at a coffee shop, and the stand was small, like a food truck, where she sold coffee, sweets, and snacks. Every night, Samantha's boyfriend, Dwayne Tortolani II, picked her up at the end of the day. But on that fateful night, when he arrived to collect her, he found the food truck completely empty, lights off, and no sign of Samantha. Confused, he tried to remember if his girlfriend had made any changes to the plan, but nothing came to mind. He became even more perplexed when he received a message from her saying, "I'm going to spend the weekend with friends. Tell my father, please." He and Samantha had been dating for almost a year, and he knew her too well to know that this message was anything but normal from her. So right away, he calls James, Samantha's father, and explains what was happening. The father immediately calls the police. The owner of the stand was then contacted by the police and said that he did not know about the closure of the place earlier, but added that it had security cameras and that they could be accessed instantly via cell phone. He then sends the link to the police, who accessed the footage within minutes. The images that they saw would send a shudder down your spine. Samantha is making a coffee, hands the drink to the customer. She then turns to look at something on the price list, and when she returns her gaze to the customer, she looks shocked. She's seen taking a step back and raising her arms as if the assailant is pointing a gun in her direction. She turns off the lights in the place, apparently following orders from an individual who minutes later asks for all the money. The lights are still off, but the cashier's computer screen means you can still see a little of what is happening. For about 5 minutes they talk. It is not known whether he is asking questions, giving instructions, making threats. But after this time, the man jumps through the service window and enters the stand. He was wearing a hoodie and a ski mask, which is very common in Alaska, especially in the winter, as it snows a lot. He obviously overpowers Samantha. He stays for about 2 more minutes. They are then seen leaving together and walking towards a car in the car park. Given the alarming content of the video, a robbery followed by a kidnapping, the local police involved the FBI immediately, and an extensive search is carried out. 1 day passes, then another and another. The despair of the young woman's family and friends increases day by day. Pages about Samantha were created on social media, flyers were given out around the city, but no clues emerged. 13 days after the kidnapping, Samantha's boyfriend receives an SMS message from her cell phone saying, "Connor Park sign under pic of Albert ain't she purty." This means Connor Park, the name of a park in the region, sign under pic of Albert. Albert was a dog who was honoured in this park. Ain't she purty is something like doesn't she look beautiful? But this beautiful was written in a street language. It was the word pretty, but sounded like purty. The police were well prepared when they got to the location. They didn't know exactly what they were going to find there. But when they got there was no Samantha. The indicated location had just a Ziploc bag, and inside a photo of Samantha next to a newspaper with the date of that exact day. The photo came with a ransom demand of $30,000 that was to be deposited into Samantha's account. The family and the police decide to deposit the money, but the bank, by order of the FBI, would have to notify the authorities as soon as someone tried to access the account, informing them of the location of the ATM or bank branch where the withdrawal would take place. In the following days, Samantha's card was used 3 times in Anchorage, but when viewing the images of the ATM, they could only see a man with his face covered making withdrawals. But on March 7th, something different occurred. 1 month and 1 week after the kidnapping, the card was used in a place that surprised the police. Arizona, a place about 6,000 kilometers from where Samantha was captured. FBI teams in the southern United States were called in and began to help monitor ATMs. After this withdrawal in Arizona, the card was used again in New Mexico and then in the state of Texas. Every time the card was used, the equipment's camera only recorded the man covered up, with ski masks, impossible to identify, but there was something else that the cameras were also recording: the car that the person was using. In all the footage, a white Ford Focus car was seen. The FBI then made a map as he was passing from state to state, heading east, and they put out an alert to the Texas Highway Patrol, asking them to be on the lookout for any white Ford Focus, as this car would most likely be linked to the kidnapping of Samantha in Alaska. A highway patrol officer in the city of Lufkin, just above Houston, who had just heard this alert, saw a car matching these exact descriptions, and luckily the driver was driving 3 miles over the speed limit, and the officer had the perfect excuse to stop it. When he asks to see the driver's license, he notices the driver is from Alaska. It was really like finding a needle in a haystack. The police officer was very discreet when asking for backup. He returned to the driver explaining that he stopped him because of excessive speed, and as standard procedure asked permission to check the interior of the vehicle. In the glove compartment of the car, he found enough evidence that indicated that this was the suspect the FBI was after. He found a ski mask, a gun, wads of money wrapped in elastic, and Samantha's cell phone and debit card. This man is called Israel Keyes. When he arrived at the police station, the FBI agents were ready to interrogate him because Samantha's kidnapping had all the characteristics of human trafficking, and they believed that Israel could have left her somewhere nearby and she could be at risk. Israel was of average height, had a healthy appearance, and he even admitted at the beginning of his testimony that he was not the person everyone around him thought he was. In fact, he said he was 2 completely different people, with 2 completely different personalities. To his neighbours, friends and family, he was a good guy, always willing to help. But when he was alone, he acted with his true instinct, a cold killer who chose his victims randomly based solely on opportunity. He said victims in the plural, and why mention all of this right away? Probably because he knew he wouldn't get out of prison. When asked about Samantha's whereabouts, he started saying, "Don't wait for her to come home. She's been dead since the day I kidnapped her." When the police asked for details, Israel says that on that night of February 1st, he had decided it was the day to kill someone. Without having anyone in particular in mind, he thought it would be easier to look for someone who worked late, as there were fewer people on the street, and the chances of him being caught would be lower. Whilst driving through town, he saw a coffee stand and thought this would be the perfect opportunity. Considering that Samantha was working alone, he ordered a coffee, and right after she handed him the drink, he pointed a gun. What he did inside, which was not possible to see clearly in the camera recording, was that when he overpowered her, he tied her hands with rope before taking her to the car. His plan was to escape with Samantha using her car, but Samantha didn't have one. She even asked him to let her leave because she hadn't seen his face, and her boyfriend was about to arrive and would see him, but Israel didn't care and continued with the plan. Inside the car, he explained that it was just a kidnapping so he could get the ransom, and when Samantha said that her family didn't have money, he responded saying not to worry, because every family finds money somehow when faced with having to pay a ransom. He also said she would get out of it all without getting hurt if she cooperated. Samantha calmed down, then stopped trying to free herself and run away. But Israel's true intention was never that. He had no intention of keeping Samantha alive. What Israel did not know was that he would have to change part of his plans. Remember that he planned to use her car, but she didn't have one. So he also planned to use her mobile phone to send messages asking for ransom. But her phone had been left in the coffee stand. Israel was on his way out of the car park. He goes back to get her mobile phone, and when he gets back, Samantha's boyfriend's truck is in the parking lot. It was right when he went to look for her and saw that the lights were off. Little did he imagine that his girlfriend was inside a truck there, in that same car park, with her hands tied in the clutches of a kidnapper. Israel waits for her boyfriend to leave the place and returns to the coffee stand to get her phone. He proceeds to send that message to Samantha's boyfriend, pretending to be her, saying that she would spend the weekend with friends. Israel takes Samantha to his house and locks her inside a small gardening shed made with a concrete base, plastic and acrylic walls. She had her hands and legs tied, her mouth gagged, and a radio turned on with the volume high, so that no one would be able to hear her calls for help. In February, the average temperature in Alaska is -6 to 14 degrees, and she stayed there, tied up, without proper warm clothing, and alone. The next step was to test Samantha's debit card password, so that he could later collect the ransom. Israel went to an ATM, tested the password which worked, and then realized that he no longer needed her. So he was ready to finish his plan, abuse her, and then take her life. Israel lived with his girlfriend, who was a nurse at the local hospital. He had an 11-year-old daughter who also lived with them. The two were at home that night and had little idea what was happening in their own backyard. After wrapping Samantha's body in a piece of bubble wrap, Israel goes home as if nothing had happened and starts to pack his bags because the next day him and his family would go on vacation. For 12 days, Samantha's body was left abandoned and practically frozen inside this mini warehouse. Whilst her family was in despair, Israel was having fun with his family on a Caribbean cruise, and this is where we see the lack of empathy, feeling, and remorse of a serial killer. Being able to enjoy a cruise with his girlfriend and daughter, knowing that he just took the life of another man's daughter, and that her body is stored in his home. Israel returns to Alaska on February 13th, which is when he wrote the note asking for the ransom and took a photo of Samantha holding the newspaper dated that day. Now you must be thinking, but how did he take the photo if she was already dead? Well, this is one of the most unscrupulous parts of this case. In the photo that the FBI received, Samantha was no longer alive. Israel used a lot of makeup to add colour to her face, tape to keep her in the desired position, and needle and thread on her eyelids to keep them open. Her body had not begun to show the signs of decomposition as it was practically frozen, and after taking a photo with his Polaroid, he abused her again. So the ransom demand photo, the photo that was sent to her family, was nothing more than a photo of Samantha's body. Now imagine how tragic it must have been for all those who looked at that photo for days, thinking that it was proof of life, when in fact it wasn't. After this photo, Israel hid the body, throwing it into a lake in the region. Her body was later found by police using the coordinates Israel himself gave during interrogation. Faced with so much cruelty, with so much coldness, the police had no doubt that he was not lying when he said that she was not the only victim. He, knowing that he would never get out of prison again, proposes a deal with the police. Israel said he would tell them everything he had done, who he had murdered, including the bank and home robberies he had committed. But in return, he wanted assurance from the justice system that he would be executed in less than a year. While the majority of prisoners want to escape the death penalty, Israel wanted this to be done as soon as possible. Why, you might ask? Because he didn't want to be in prison for decades. Usually the death penalty takes a long time to be carried out. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes years and years. And apart from him not wanting to stay in prison waiting, he felt it would be better to be dead so that his daughter would not suffer the consequences of having a serial killer father alive on death row. Once again, it is possible to see the narcissistic side of those who only care about what is theirs. His daughter's life matters, her feelings matter, her future matters, everything about her matters to him, but the lives of the victims and the families of the people he took from the world do not. And that was the police's interest, to find out who the other victims were. While they worked to negotiate this execution, Israel gradually released information, but he never gave the details of a complete crime. Like a good strategist, he was releasing and negotiating because what he really wanted was to see the execution paper signed in front of him. He always said that the only way they would find out who his victims were would be through him, as they were all reported missing and were from different states and even countries, and there was no way the police alone could connect the victims. Israel planned his crimes extensively. He travelled the entire country hiding murder kits in various places containing guns, silencer, tapes, ropes, knives, even money. Sometimes he put it in this kit in case one day he needed it in the future. Whenever he wanted, he could go back to these places. The materials would be ready and he wouldn't be tracked easily. Plus, he wouldn't need to go through airport security carrying a gun. So it was like this. Whenever he travelled, if on that trip he didn't commit any crime, he would at least buy items and hide them somewhere. Leave them inside abandoned properties, bury them, and write down the locations to retrieve the items when he returned, which could be years later. He had no preference for gender, age, or appearance of the victims. They were chosen only by opportunity. Let's assume he hid one of the kits on a trail in some park. The day he went to that area again with the intention of using the kit, the first person who passed by with the opportunity for discreet action, he would attack. He said that his modus operandi was not to have a modus operandi. All the crimes occurred far from his home, except in the case of Samantha. Despite the agreement, the police were never able to obtain enough information from him to close all the cases, because on December 2nd, 2012, 9 months after he was arrested, Israel took his own life inside his cell, leaving behind a 4-page letter which basically said nothing very interesting to the police, other than very strange words with a macabre tone praising the act of killing. Samantha's case was closed, but unfortunately several other crimes could not be solved. Eight years later, in May 2020, the FBI published other sheets left by Israel. So it wasn't just the 4 pages, there were in fact 12 more sheets that were omitted. All the other sheets were drawings, which included 11 skulls, all with a cross on their forehead and a different design from the others, which resembles a goat inside a star, also with a cross on its forehead. One of the skulls had a phrase written, "We are one." Now think, since December 2012, the FBI had these drawings, but only now did they decide to inform the public. Many newspapers, such as CBS News and the Washington Post, discussed the possibility that the police are trying to increase the chances of deciphering these drawings. They had made no progress in understanding them for almost a decade. The investigation into the Israel Keys case is still very active for the FBI. They have been collecting information from all the places Israel went to since 1996, when, according to him, the crimes began, through receipts for expenses from hotels, car rental companies, airline tickets, and mobile phone bills. Today they have a coverage map with the main cities being Albany, New York, Dallas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, and probably also in Mexico, Canada, and Belize, because he was also in those places. Although I focused this case on Samantha and explained a little about Israel Keys here, there is a lot of information about him, and because of that I separated an exclusive episode to talk just about him. To find out more details about Israel Keys, his actions during the more than 15 years that he was active, and a deeper analysis of possible explanations for these mysterious drawings, just click here and watch part 2 of this case.